Just having completed my preparatory painting experiment in anticipation of getting into making and painting my Christmas present, it's now time to take a closer look at the work I have ahead of me with an unboxing video. I'll begin by mentioning that this is the first attempt at making a Games Workshop Warhammer 28mm miniature project in 35 years. When I was younger, I did go through a Warhammer phase, and it was, as it happens, centred around the old world orcs. Though back then, miniatures were all white metal models, and the concept of multi-part posable figures wasn't even on the books. So this Age of Sigmar Orruk set is full of new and unfamiliar concepts, different kinds of orcs, different kinds of models, and very definitely new techniques in miniature painting. So let's start by looking at the box set and what we have inside. Note at this point that I'm not going to dwell on any issues of Games Workshop pricing and how it's changed from the 1990s. That's all I'm going to say. What we have here is 3 main sprues of injection moulded grey plastic, a pack of 28mm diameter bases, and a small full colour instruction booklet. These, along with the excellent colour photo art on the box, is all you really need to get started on making your unit of 10 Orruk Ardboys. That said, it is advisable, and I certainly did, to take some time to do a bit of research into how to complete these models. Quite aside from my already mentioned painting test model, there are a plethora of useful YouTube tutorials available on how to paint these particular orcs. If anything, there's almost too many in fact, as each modeller I watched had their very own approach to painting these miniatures. And a big part of my test model was to explore the different techniques and to help me decide on my very own painting strategy. Finding my own way was particularly important to me. As a person who last painted fantasy figures in the 1990s, I realised painting fashions and paints themselves have evolved a lot, and I wanted to bring myself up to date. Additionally, the majority of my painting experience had been in painting historic wargaming models, which, while sharing some relatable techniques, is a completely different kettle of fish when it comes to painting styles and aesthetics. So, looking at these sprues more closely, I noticed 2 main things. Firstly, how bigger orcs have gotten, and secondly, how much more delicately sculpted detail has gotten compared to the sometimes quite vague sculpting of the white metal model era. While I knew detail in 28mm scale could be quite fine from the days of my wargame plastic modelling, it was quite jarring just how much more intricate and fine the attention to detail was in these new models. Compared to the last cast metal blob in the shape of an orc that I remember painting, these new models were on another level. Looking through all the sprues, the next surprise was the options available with the multi-part mouldings, with different heads, shields and weapons. Again, going back to the 1990s, if you wanted to make up a regiment of, say, orc spearmen, then that would consist of a set of maybe only a couple of truly different figures, duplicated repeatedly, but then all painted slightly different to give the illusion of variety in the unit. On the other hand, the modern counterpart unit could be made up to look like a real collection of individual soldiers. And if I wanted to make multiple units, I would still have enough customizable options to make these units look marginally different. No more ranks and ranks of the same couple of models repeated over and over again, as it used to be in the 1990s. Of particular note was the ability to mix and match optional weapons, plus the fact that with plastic it's a lot easier to kit bash custom figures than it was back in the days of metal models. Although even then it was possible to chop up white metal figures, it was a slightly more tricky process and came under the category of advanced modelling. I was also very glad to see that the level of detail that goes into the printed instructions has come a long way as well. Back in the old days, you got a bag of miniatures and an unspoken and unprinted set of instructions that boiled down to get on with it. And your main recourse was to, remembering that there was no internet then, the monthly edition of White Dwarf magazine or other fantasy magazines to give you ideas and inspiration of how to do your models. Now, along with this box set of Orruk Warclan models, my wife thoughtfully bought me the companion volume, the Age of Sigmar lore book, or Battle Tome as it's called. I'm a huge sucker for books of fantasy lore. I love them, and the Games Workshop ones are superb and a great read in themselves. I have already spent quite a lot of time perusing the pages of this faction book, enjoying the Age of Sigmar lore, the Orc faction backstory, the unit organisation, and the information on individual unit models. But on top of this, there's a very nice overview of painting techniques for the orcs, which are particularly helpful for a person like me who is dipping their toe in Warhammer fantasy painting in its current state for the first time in a great many years. Of particular note is the superb artwork and photography of the painted orc units that are in the book. And I'm really glad to have this manual, even if I don't intend to play a single game of Warhammer, as it's full of inspiration and ideas for painting these models. And that's it really. I'm exceptionally pleased with this excellent set of models and its companion book, and I have to thank my wife for such a thoughtful present. To my surprise, she was obviously paying at least some attention to all my hobby chatter prior to Christmas. So next I'll be putting together these models, and I'll do a video of that, as I'd like to explore how customisable these figures actually are. Additionally, I have to plan exactly what kind of Orruk Ardboy unit I want to make, sword carrying or spear carrying or mixed, and how to paint them. Well, that's it all for now. Hopefully in the next video we'll see how this project progresses. Thanks for watching.